different places.
I think we're
I
live.
think we're live.
Ah, Happy New Year. We hope everyone had,
Believe
yeah,
2022. Here we are.
here we are. Hoping that people's holidays were restful, got a chance to renew a little bit, and that you're returning to work ready to tackle, this new year and whatever it has in store. We want to welcome you to Thursdays with Culture Talk. I'm Cynthia Forstman. This is my sister and business partner.
I'm Teresa Agresta, even though my name says Culture Talk.
We know who you are. We're the co-founders of Culture Talk. And if you are new to this conversation or the Culture Talk community, what we do at Culture Talk is we turn culture into a tangible business asset. This week, this Thursdays with Culture Talk is the fifth in a series of 6 LinkedIn Lives we've been hosting that take a deeper dive on how do you activate Culture Talk profiles across an organization and across the talent lifecycle. What we're aiming to share on a deeper level is how story connects our individual storylines and our organizational collective storylines, how all of those things come together in the experience of workplace culture, and how once it becomes tangible, there's all sorts of ways you can activate it. So that's the thread that's tying us through the series. Welcome. Right. Yeah. If you're
new. And that tangibility, the critical thing about that is, everybody's talking about it and it's sort of airy-fairy, but it has direct ties to results and outcomes. And that's not going to be, any more clear than in our today's conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're in this 5th week, we're here today to talk about recruiting and onboarding. How do you take culture, a tangible version of your culture, and use it to recruit, to hire, and to onboard people that feel like they belong to your organization from day one? We look at the headlines. We know there's a hiring problem. It followed us into 2022 at the end of our 2.5 year pandemic here. You see it in the headlines. You also see it at every restaurant, at every coffee shop in your neighborhood where, there's a little bit of understanding that things are a little slower, service is a little slower. We're getting things a little bit slower because there are not enough people working. I posted an article this morning to LinkedIn that was in Forbes magazine. It's called Why 2022 is the Year of Workplace Culture. And it specifically ties this concept of culture to the talent, the hiring and recruiting problem right now. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And Teresa, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I think is, really key to this conversation is the idea that this war on talent, the challenge and the struggle people having is not landing equally. So not everyone is having trouble. And that's the good news, right? That's the good news, because we're so focused on the companies and the organizations that are struggling. What we really need to pay attention to is those who have gotten it right, and to study what have they done, and what can we start to do to get things different. We know that employees are really focused on this culture, but they care about the long term, the big picture. So thinking about the big picture, I thought I would pull up this graphic that shows, I think, sort of looking with the end in mind. Here's a graphic that shows over the past year the financial performance, right? So we know that financial performance is one of the key indicators that we're winning in these ways. So this is the financial performance as compared from 2020 to 2021 of UPS and FedEx. The top line, the white line, is UPS, and the bottom line is FedEx. You can see that they were tracking along, and then toward the beginning of the fall, all of a sudden this departure in the share price of these two companies makes a big, shift. So I'll just to close out, I just wanted to show it to you because sometimes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So let's take this apart and look at what happened. UPS, FedEx. Well, there's an article in Bloomberg that takes a look at what happened not just this year, but what happened 10, 15 plus years ago in the choices and that these companies made around their culture and around their drivers. And how come UPS is able to hold on to drivers today that have maybe been with the company for a long time? They've stuck around. They haven't job hopped. They're not looking for, maybe they are getting paid very well, but they're not job hopping for, what looks to be greener someplace else in the industry. I mean, years of working in the trucking industry, we know this firsthand with our clients, the tactics they get used to sort of recruit from one shop.
Sign on bonus.
Right. But FedEx made some clear decisions that are baked into their culture. When they took a look years ago at trying to stop people from unionizing and from, really claiming the larger workplace benefits and employment practices, that UPS went a different route. And they worked through the struggles of that union environment. And this is not a union, non-union push, but really a conversation about what did it create in the culture of those organizations. So the big thought, longevity of UPS's decision to make their employees a priority and to consistently act from that space is showing up in their results when business models get challenged. So FedEx made a decision to take that last mile of delivery and push it out to contractors. In doing so, they also pushed out the actual cost of maintaining vehicles and maintaining all the things that a contractor has to do as a small business to maintain that operation. Pushed all the risk and the cost of those things out so that they could reduce their own labor costs and their own vehicle maintenance cost. So in the short term, it looked like a really smart thing, but it completely changed the culture of the organization and set them up for some, down the road headaches. And that's really what we want to think about today is how do the decisions that we make for the bottom line, the financial outcomes, the stock prices, impact things when things get tough? Are we able to maintain that when we have shifts and changes? And so UPS's example shows us that attention paid to culture and the employees and what was good for them throughout this whole time has paid off in crunch time. We've seen that before.
Yeah, I love what you said too. It's like a decision, like every decision we make about how we run our businesses impacts the experience that we're creating. It's almost like, how do you get your arms around culture when every single decision is actually forming the experience and influencing the experience that we had? Teresa mentioned we've done in our careers a lot of work in the transportation industry. And one thing we can tell you is that recruiting truck drivers in the transportation industry has been a headache long before we had like the major hiring issues we have now across industries.
Right, absolutely.
The trucking industry could count on hiring more than one person per job every year because
over 100% turnover, right?
Right, again and again and again. And one of the trucking companies that we worked with is based in the Midwest. It was kind of a Midwestern mid-sized trucking company that was looking for growth. And if you're going to tackle growth as a transportation company, you need more drivers. You need more trucks on the road delivering more goods. There's just
it's a one-to-one equation, right?
Right, no way to get around it.
Yeah.
And so here's an example of where an organization focused on culture and specifically used the CultureTalk profiles to build a story around their culture that was very reflective of who they were, right? Kind of the underlying DNA of the organization. In this particular case, we sent out our survey, CultureTalk survey for organizations to drivers, to people working in the office. We ran focus groups. We really looked at what is it like to be part of this trucking company as opposed to another trucking company. And as a result of all that research, we created a cultural profile that included 3 different storylines that really made this organization stand out. The the president of the organization said, "Wow, this whole process kind of uncovered that underlying storyline that's running through everything that we do here." And that gave him a way to kind of get his arms around the culture. We took that culture, those storylines, in this case, it was the innocent, the hero, and the explorer, which are part of the CultureTalk system. And we built an entire recruiting program around that. We built, that was sort of that became the foundational place from which we created all of the recruiting messages, the experience. There were 53-foot billboards that you can think of as the side of a truck running across the highway.
Still running across the highways today.
In the US, talking about what it is about this culture that is so different from what you might experience in another trucking company. Over time, because these things do take time, it's a long game, as Teresa said, but over time, this organization has doubled, more than doubled, the size of its fleet because it is able to bring in truck drivers that are looking and feel connected to that culture. And it allows them then also, once they get there, to feel like they're part of something and belong in this organization. Right. So it's just been a really big win-win that looks at pausing to focus first on the culture and to get that right. And then build upon it for recruiting and an employment brand as well.
Right, employment brand is the phrase I was going to use there. So when we see recruiters that might feel like they're in a crucible right now, they're kind of in this catch-22. Well, what am I going to do? I can't change the company necessarily on a dime. It's really that long-term view that makes all the difference in the world. So start now. Employees don't expect you to be perfect. They do expect you to be trying and making shifts and listening and hearing them. And those messages are an important part of what makes up a workplace culture as well, that people are really feel like they're being heard. And then when that, attractive call comes to recruit them away to another company, they'll have had their ear to the ground. They'll have understood, where the rubber meets the road, no pun intended.
Yeah.
What really makes somebody, different. And then I think you have an opportunity to carry that through. So you've got this message out there that's built on an employment brand. But how do you attract people who are a good match for that? And how do you hear them sort of in that hiring process and strengthen your hiring process and your onboarding process so that you can keep tapping into it? And CultureTalk can help there too. So I want to share about an organization that has been working with CultureTalk Profiles for quite a while. They have looked at it from both perspectives, both from the individual and the organizational. So using that organizational profile to understand, this is who we are. These are the things we're really good at. This is what we stand for. We have a jester culture here. So we have an awful lot of fun at work. We sometimes make jokes that don't land too well. Whoops, that's a part of who we are as well. So real honesty about what shows up and why.
And owning both sides, I think, I hear.
Yeah. So having that as a foundation, when they hire people at the second interview, they run a CultureTalk for Individuals survey. And because their interviewers are trained to hear the patterns and understand what are the drivers and what maybe some of the challenges of each of the patterns, they can have a much more human to human, personal connection and conversation that makes that interview so much more effective. And not only that, then when they talk about the culture of the organization, they're using that same framework, that same language. So from day one, they're really building understanding about who are you, how might you fit here, and then sharing as they, extend an offer and bring someone into the onboarding process. Hey, these are the profiles of all your colleagues. Here's the culture profile of our company and our leaders. Here's the ways it shows up in positive ways. Here's the ways in which they sometimes fall down and, need to, as any human being, sort of pick themselves back up. It's not personal. It's not directed at you. So this continuum of experience.
Yeah, and I think I hear too, Teresa, it's not perfect because
It's not perfect.
no
Yeah.
human being is perfect, no culture is perfect. And so I'm appreciating kind of the here, this is us in that very authentic way.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
I mean, I go back to thinking about those, 53-foot billboards driving around on trucks. And I think when people are attracted to the message, they're attracted to the whole message. I know those trucks say celebrating faith and family, because that's an important part of the commitment, at that company. And families aren't perfect either, but they accept each other. They continue to come back and try again. And I think cultures can be that way too, when we have honest conversations that are unfolding
Yeah.
around them.
Yeah. I want to point that article I mentioned that I posted today, 2022 is the year of workplace culture. One of the trends that the author points out is this desire for employees to feel connected. That's a tough thing for, leaders to get their head around. Like, how do I make somebody feel connected? It's so airy fairy, right? But as we've described these two clients that have used the Culture Talk profiles, understanding the story, like being able to show up as who you are and understand what you're stepping into from a culture standpoint does create that sense of connection between employees and organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, from an onboarding perspective, the more things that we can do to create clarity around, what it's like to be here, I think that we also invite people into being part of the solutions we need to work toward. So we have, you know, a work in progress in every organization, an acknowledgement that we have a certain set of goals, but we're not there yet, and we're taking steps and making strides toward a culture that we can all participate in, feel connected to, and be part of. And I think that one of the beautiful parts of working with archetype and story is, we do have those shadow sides, the things that go wrong, but when we can sort of accept responsibility for them, step back up, either as a culture or as individuals working on teams, then we can stick with it.
Mm.
And, there isn't that temptation to go someplace else where maybe the results part of the business is really pushing everything.
Mm.
So going back quickly to that FedEx UPS example, when FedEx was making decisions around the outcomes, the numbers added up to, a clear decision to push risk and to, not bring those employees into consideration. In fact, at that point, they were not kept on. We didn't have that last mile employee on the job anymore. And so the decision, at that time that UPS made was quite different. So at any point, we can stop and start to change the choices that we make,
Mm.
and make a commitment to a culture, and by looking at it and by understanding it. And a culture talk profile gives us the opportunity to name it,
Mm.
to lay it out against a framework, to have an open conversation, and to weigh the aspects of it that are in alignment with what we want to create, and those things that we might close our eyes to if we don't really take a hard look at what we're doing.
Mm. I will just underscore the honesty, right? The honesty of like, this is who we are at this moment in time. And it's not perfect, but we want to bring you into it. And it's such a different, there's a connection then between our employment brand and the messages we use for recruiting and the actual experience you have as you're onboarded and come into the company. compared to an organization that might just be putting ideas out into the world about this is what it's going to be like, but it's not based on the culture. And then what happens is they've got, a Glassdoor review that said they promised this, this, and this, or it was going to be like XYZ. And when I actually got there, none of that was really happening or true. So this is a chance when you measure your culture first and you use that as the starting place for brand recruiting, onboarding, that whole people function of bringing people in, the power that you can create with that kind of experience.
So we have a question here coming in from Philippa, and she's asking if we have a specific example where Culture Talk has actually been used in the onboarding process from the job offer to the first 90 days. And yes, so that story that we were talking about with the technology company is a great example of that, where they are using it in the hiring process as part of the interview. Now, we're really clear that Culture Talk is not a tool to eliminate a wrong fit archetype. There are no right or wrong fit archetype patterns, but rather as a tool to have a more effective and impactful conversation where clearer understanding is created. But yeah, they use it in the interview process. And then part of the onboarding is an orientation where they are taught about the company culture. They're literally taught this is the archetype patterns and the culture profile of our organization. These are the ways in which it shows up, how it parlays into the expectations and the experiences that employees have together. So it's really brought very clearly to the fore in that conversation. Then, as they're handed the employee handbook and the employee directory, everybody's profiles are present. So everybody's already speaking the common language. When you show up at your desk, you'll notice everybody all around you, for those who aren't working remote, have their archetype profiles displayed. There are multiple ways in which they have literally put them on display as part of a reinforcement of the profiles and of the ideals.
I love that.
In the organization. And the leader steps boldly into his own profile as part of the orientation as well, saying, this is who I am. This is what you can expect from me. This is what I care about. And so right from day one, that onboarding includes an understanding of who you are, how you fit in, and then coaching is used as an employee moves forward to help them step into their strengths and get training where they need it and to challenge themselves to overcome their shadows, because that language is so commonly used throughout the organization. Wow. So that's a great sort of through line example, in a great way.
And shout out to Michael Cruz, who is the Culture Talk certified partner who introduced that company to the Culture Talk system. It's a great example. And I'm also keyed in when you're talking about new employees, seeing profiles of other employees, and that whole language being adopted. One thing we hear often is, oh, it's so easy. All right. Story is so easy because, I might not remember my color or my number or my letter, or if you give me some kind of assessment where I have to now understand what does that code mean, versus if I walk into the room and say, hey, my top archetype is creator, it already creates a impression for people about what I might be like or what I might care about. And that's just because story is so, deeply embedded in who we are as human beings. So really powerful stuff.
It is. And thinking about that interview, for instance, at which point, and this is at the second interview, but at that point, the interviewer has your profile in front of them. And how much more are they listening when they're asking questions that are directly tied to what you've indicated is important to you? So instead of now listening with my ear tuned toward only the company goals or the position that's open, I'm actually talking to a real human who have their own goals, who show up with their own background. And it's always that way. But this approach allows you to really create a much more connected experience right from the interview. And so when you're having a connected experience at the interview and an honest exchange of this is what it's like
Right.
to be here and these are the people that you'll be working with, then that person gets to make a clear decision as well, based on, a much deeper set of facts and information. And it all happens again very quickly because of that human understanding of archetype, because it's very, we already have a sort of intuitive understanding about what these patterns mean and how they show up. So I think that commitment to really embed it in an interview process makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So when you can have that through line of what we say about ourselves and our culture is tied to the way we really behave because we've measured it and we've messaged it from that perspective.
We can talk about it and share the same language to use to talk about it. So
yeah, and I think that makes it much easier to share about the vulnerabilities and the places that, hey, we're working toward this, but we're not there yet.
Right.
And then when we have an interview in that process, we are asking if we really care about you. We care so much about who you are that we're going to shape this interview around who you are and how you show up as a human, because we want to understand how you'll fit here. And oh, by the way, here's what here is all about. When we get you into the team and on board, and again, reinforcing those ideas with a common language. So you're learning that language right from the beginning. And your attraction maybe even to the messages is being confirmed. So there's a depth.
I feel it. Now I feel it. So back to that comment earlier, how do you make people feel something? Now I'm feeling it because there's a connection that's that red thread that's coming all the way through.
And I think consistency is another really good word. So there's a consistency when you measure it and you message it and you live it. There's a consistency to the commitment of how we show up.
And we're gonna take this conversation deeper next week. Next week, we're going to be focused on engaging and retaining employees. How do you use culture as an asset, as a tool to really get people on board and connected over the long haul? So we'll be back next Thursday with that conversation. All of this series is leading up to CultureTalk certification. If you've got a recruiting challenge or you are a consultant that works in the space of employment branding, recruiting and hiring, we would love to share how you can use the CultureTalk system to simplify those challenges. So we do have 2 certification classes kicking off on January 20th. If you'd like to know more about that program, feel free to reach out to either Teresa or myself. And we're happy to answer your questions, share a Culture Talk assessment, give you a feel for how you could be bringing it into your engagements.
Yep, absolutely. We look forward to seeing some of you in certification, and we look forward to wrapping up this series next week. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.